You've got $8,000 sitting in your savings account. You've also got $15,000 in debt spread across a couple of credit cards and a student loan. And every month you have an extra $500 after covering your bills. So here's the question that's probably keeping you up at night. Do you throw that money at the debt and try to become debt-free as fast as possible? Or do you start investing it because you're 28 years old and everyone keeps telling you that compound interest only works if you start young? You've heard Dave Ramsey scream about the debt snowball. Pay off every penny before you invest a dollar. Then you've got index fund investors saying time in the market beats timing the market, and every year you wait costs you tens of thousands in compound growth. Both arguments sound right. Both have math backing them up. And you're stuck in the middle, paralyzed, doing nothing because you're terrified of making the wrong choice. Here's the truth that's going to save you months of analysis paralysis. There is no universal right answer, but there is a right answer for you, based on specific numbers that most people never actually calculate. My name is Mike, and I'm going to give you the exact framework to make this decision for your situation. Not some guru's one-size-fits-all rule that ignores your actual interest rates, your age, and your income stability. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to do with your next dollar. So hit that subscribe button and let's figure this out. Before we get into the math, we need to talk about why this question causes so much anxiety and why most people handle it completely wrong. This isn't just a financial decision. It's a psychological trap that keeps people frozen in place for years. And that indecision costs more than making either choice and sticking with it. Here's what happens. You finally reach a point where you have some extra money each month. For the first time in your adult life, you're not living paycheck to paycheck. You've got $300, maybe $500, maybe even $1,000 that doesn't have a predetermined destination. And immediately, you're hit with contradictory advice from every direction. One camp tells you that debt is an emergency, that every dollar of debt you carry is a dollar you'll pay interest on, and that interest is stealing from your future. They say you need to attack it with everything you have. Debt-free is the goal. Nothing else matters until you get there. The other camp tells you that you're young, that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, but only if you give it time to work. They show you graphs of what happens when you start investing at 25 versus 35, and the difference is hundreds of thousands of dollars. They say debt can wait, time can't. Both sides sound convincing, and that's the problem. So you split the difference. You put $200 toward debt, $200 into investments, and keep $100 for emergencies. It feels balanced, responsible, like you're covering all your bases. But here's what you've actually done. You're not paying off debt fast enough to save significant interest. You're not investing enough to get compound interest really working, and you're stuck in this mediocre middle ground, making minimal progress in either direction. This is decision paralysis, and it's costing you. Let's talk about why the generic advice fails so spectacularly. Dave Ramsey says pay off all debt before investing anything. This works great for people who have spending problems, for people who will blow their investment money on a new TV if it's sitting in a brokerage account, for people who need the psychological win of becoming debt-free to stay motivated. But it completely ignores the fact that not all debt is created equal. A 3% student loan is not the same as a 24% credit card. Treating them the same is mathematical malpractice. It also ignores opportunity cost. If you're 25 years old and you spend 3 years aggressively paying off a 4% student loan instead of investing, you just gave up some of the most valuable compound interest years of your life. That decision could cost you $100,000 or more by retirement. On the other side, the index fund investors tell you to invest now and let time work its magic. And they're right about compound interest being incredibly powerful, but they're wrong when they ignore the destruction caused by high interest debt. If you're carrying $10,000 on a credit card at 22% interest, you're paying $2,200 per year just in interest. No investment strategy reliably returns 22% after taxes. You're literally losing money by investing instead of paying that off. They also assume everyone watching their videos already has an emergency fund. They don't. Most people have less than $1,000 in savings. Telling someone with no safety net to invest is setting them up for disaster. So here's the reality. Your situation determines the right answer. Not Dave Ramsey's opinion, not some financial influencer's generic advice. Your specific numbers. The type of debt you have matters. The interest rate matters. Your age and time horizon matter. Your income stability matters. And yes, your psychological relationship with debt matters. There's a formula you can follow to figure this out. And that's what we're about to build. Let's start with the fundamental principle that drives this entire decision. And once you understand this, everything else becomes much clearer. When you pay off debt, you're earning a guaranteed return equal to the interest rate on that debt. If you have a credit card charging 20% interest and you pay off $1,000, you just saved yourself $200 in interest over the next year. That's a guaranteed 20% return. No stock market volatility, no risk, just a guaranteed gain. When you invest money, you're hoping to earn a return based on historical market averages. The S&P 500 has averaged about 10% annually over the long term. After inflation, that's closer to 7 or 8% in real returns. But here's the key. That return isn't guaranteed. Some years the market is up 30%. Other years it's down 20%. Over decades, it averages out to around 8%. But any given year is a gamble. So the core question becomes this. Is the guaranteed return from paying off your debt higher than the expected return from investing? Whichever number is higher wins mathematically. Let me show you how this plays out across different types of debt. Payday loans and title loans. These charge interest rates between 300 and 500% APR. If you have one of these, stop watching this video and pay it off immediately. There is no scenario where investing makes sense. This is financial cancer. Kill it. Credit cards. The average credit card interest rate right now is between 20 and 25%. Some are higher, some are lower, but let's use 22% as our benchmark. If you pay off $5,000 in credit card debt at 22%, you save $1,100 in interest over the next year. That's a guaranteed $1,100 gain. If you invest that same $5,000 in an index fund and it returns the historical average of 8%, you make $400. And that's before taxes. After taxes, you're looking at maybe $320. The credit card payoff wins by $780. It's not even close. Decision. Pay off credit cards before investing. Always. The guaranteed return is too high to pass up. Personal loans. These typically charge between 8 and 15% depending on your credit score and when you borrowed. Above 7%, pay it off first. Below 5%, invest instead. Student loans. Federal student loans range from about 4 to 7% depending on when you borrowed. Private student loans can be higher, sometimes 8 to 12%. If you got private loans above 7%, treat them like credit cards. Pay them off before investing. If you've got federal loans at 4 or 5%, this is where investing starts to make more sense. An 8% investment return beats a 4% loan cost. You come out ahead by investing. Auto loans. These usually run between 4 and 8% depending on your credit and when you bought the car. Above 7%, pay it off first. Below 5%, invest instead. Mortgages. Most mortgages right now are between 6 and 7% if you bought recently. Some people locked in rates at 3% during 2020 and 2021. If you have a 3% mortgage, you should absolutely not pay it off early. Invest instead. The spread between 3% and 8% investment returns is significant. If you have a 6.5% mortgage, this is borderline. The math leans slightly toward investing, but it's close enough that other factors matter. So here's the threshold that makes this simple. If your debt has an interest rate above 7 to 8%, pay it off before investing. The guaranteed return beats the expected market return. If your debt is below 5%, invest instead. You'll likely come out ahead. If your debt is between 5 and 7%, we're in the gray zone where other factors determine the right choice. But there's one more layer to this that most people completely miss: taxes. Investment returns are taxed. When you sell stocks or funds for a profit, you pay capital gains tax. That's 15 or 20% for most people on long-term gains. So if your investment returns 8% and you pay 15% capital gains tax, your after-tax return is really only 6.8%. Meanwhile, paying off debt gives you a return equal to the interest rate, and that return is completely tax-free. You don't pay taxes on money you didn't have to pay in interest. This changes the math. When you factor in taxes, the real comparison is debt interest rate versus after-tax investment returns, which means the threshold shifts. Debt above 6 or 7% should probably be paid off first, even when comparing to investments that historically return 8%. Let me give you two real scenarios to make this concrete. Scenario A: you have $10,000 and you owe $10,000 on a credit card at 22%. Option 1, pay off the credit card. You save $2,200 in interest over the next year. That's a guaranteed 22% return, tax-free. Option 2, invest in an index fund. If it returns 8%, you make $800. After taxes, maybe $680. Paying off the credit card wins by $1,520. It's not even a question. Scenario B: you have $10,000 and you owe $10,000 in student loans at 4.5%. Option 1, pay off the student loan. You save $450 in interest over the next year, guaranteed 4.5% return. Option 2, invest in an index fund. If it returns 8%, you make $800. After taxes, maybe $680. Investing wins by $230. Same amount of money, different interest rates, completely different answers. This is why generic advice fails. The right choice depends on the numbers. Before you aggressively pay off debt or start investing, there's one thing that has to come first. And if you skip this step, you're setting yourself up to fail at both. You need an emergency fund. I know this sounds boring. I know you want to jump straight into paying off debt or building wealth through investments, but without a safety net, you're going to end up in a worse position than when you started. Here's why. Let's say you take every extra dollar you have and throw it at your credit card debt. You're making progress. The balance is dropping. You're motivated. You're finally getting out of the hole. Then your car breaks down. The repair costs $1,200 and you have $300 in your checking account because you've been dumping everything into debt payoff. What do? You put the repair on your credit card, the same credit card you've been working so hard to pay down. You just went backwards. You didn't make progress. You just shuffled the debt around. This is the emergency fund paradox. You can't effectively pay off debt without a buffer to handle surprises, and life is full of surprises. So here's the bare minimum. Before you aggressively pay off debt or invest a single dollar, you need $1,000 to $2,000 in a savings account that you don't touch unless there's an actual emergency. This isn't your investment fund. This isn't your vacation fund. This is the universe just threw something unexpected at me fund. $1,000 covers most small emergencies: car repair, urgent care visit, broken appliance, something in that range. It won't cover everything. It won't cover a job loss or a major medical issue, but it will prevent you from going into new debt every time something minor goes wrong. Once you have that $1,000 to $2,000 buffer, then you can start aggressively paying off high-interest debt. But here's where most people mess this up. They hear you need an emergency fund, and they think they need 6 months of expenses saved before they can do anything else. No, that's the end goal, not the starting point. The sequence is this: save $1,000 to $2,000, that's your bare minimum safety net. Then pay off any debt that has an interest rate above 7 or 8%. This is high interest debt that's actively destroying your wealth. It's an emergency. You handle it. Once that high interest debt is gone, then you build your emergency fund up to 3 to 6 months of expenses. How much you need depends on your situation. If you have a stable government job with strong benefits, 3 months is probably fine. If you're a freelancer or work in a volatile industry, you want 6 months, maybe more. But the point is, you don't wait to have 6 months saved before attacking high interest debt. That would be a mistake. Credit card debt at 22% is too destructive to let it sit while you slowly build a big emergency fund. You build enough of a buffer to prevent new debt, you kill the high interest debt, then you finish building your full emergency fund, then you start investing aggressively. Let me show you why this order matters. Person A decides to pay off all their debt with no emergency fund. They take their $5,000 in savings and throw it all at their credit card. Great! The credit card balance drops by $5,000, but now they have zero in savings. 2 months later, they need a $1,200 car repair. They have no cash. It goes back on the credit card. Net result, they paid off $5,000 but added back $1,200. They made $3,800 in actual progress, but they're still stuck in the debt cycle. Person B keeps $1,500 as an emergency fund and puts $3,500 toward the credit card. The credit card balance drops by $3,500. They still have $1,500 in savings. When the $1,200 car repair happens, they pay for it from their emergency fund. They're left with $300, which they quickly rebuild. Net result, they paid off $3,500 and didn't create any new debt. They made $3,500 in actual progress, and they have a path forward. Person B made less dramatic progress on paper, but they're in a better position because they're not vulnerable to the next surprise. This is why the emergency fund comes first. Not because it's exciting, but because without it, you're playing financial whack-a-mole. Every time you make progress, something pops up and sends you backwards. Build the buffer, then attack the debt, then finish the emergency fund, then invest. In that order. Now we get to the one exception that breaks all the rules we just talked about, and it's important enough that you need to understand it even if you have high interest debt. If your employer offers a 401k match, you contribute enough to get that match even if you're carrying credit card debt at 22%. This is the only exception, and here's why. Employer matching is free money. It's a guaranteed return that's higher than any debt interest rate you'll ever have. Here's how it typically works. Your employer might say they'll match 50% of your contributions up to 6% of your salary. Let's break that down with real numbers. You make $60,000 per year. You contribute 6% of your salary to your 401k. That's $3,600 per year or $300 a month. Your employer adds 50% of that amount. They put in $1,800 per year. That's $150 per month. You contributed $3,600. The account now has $5,400. You just got a 50% return instantly before the money even gets invested in anything. Some employers are even more generous. Some match dollar for dollar up to a certain percentage. If you put in $3,000, they put in $3,000. That's an instant 100% return. There is nothing else in the world of finance that offers guaranteed 50 to 100% returns. Nothing. Even credit card debt at 24% doesn't beat a 50% instant match. Let me show you the math on why this works even when you have high interest debt. You make $60,000. You have $10,000 in credit card debt at 22%. You have an extra $300 per month after minimum payments. Option A, skip the 401k match, put all the $300 toward the credit card. Over 1 year, you pay off $3,600 in credit card debt. You save about $792 in interest, but you missed out on $1,800 in employer matching. Net position, saved $792, left $1,800 on the table. You're down $1,008. Option B, contribute $300 per month to get the full employer match. Pay the credit card more slowly. Over 1 year, you contributed $3,600 to your 401k. Your employer added $1,800. Your account has $5,400 before any investment growth. You didn't pay down the credit card as fast, so you paid an extra $792 in interest that year. Net position, gained $1,800 in matching, paid $792 in extra interest. You're ahead $1,008. Option B wins even though you're carrying expensive debt. The math works because the employer match is so powerful that it overcomes even high interest debt costs. Now there's one caveat you need to know about: vesting schedules. Some employers don't let you keep the match money immediately. They have a vesting schedule that might say you need to stay with the company for 2 or 3 years before the match becomes fully yours. If you're planning to leave your job in 6 months, the match might not be worth it because you won't get to keep it. Check your plan documents. Look for the vesting schedule. If you're staying long enough to vest, take the match. If you're leaving before you vest, you might skip the match and pay down debt instead. But for most people in most situations, the right move is this. Contribute just enough to your 401k to get the full employer match, not more, just enough to capture the free money. Then take everything else and throw it at your high interest debt. Once the high interest debt is gone, you can increase your 401k contributions beyond the match. But you never, ever leave employer matching on the table. That's the one exception to the payoff high interest debt first rule. Free money beats everything. Let's talk about something that most financial advice completely ignores: human psychology. Because here's the truth. Sometimes the mathematically optimal choice is the wrong choice for you as a person. We're not robots. We're not spreadsheets. We have emotions, stress responses, and mental health that affects our decision-making. And sometimes making the suboptimal financial choice is actually the right move because it addresses the psychological weight you're carrying. Debt creates stress, real, measurable, physical stress. It affects your sleep, it affects your relationships, it affects your productivity at work. It creates a constant low-level anxiety that follows you everywhere. Some people can carry a $15,000 student loan at 5% interest and not think about it. It's just a bill they pay every month, no emotional weight. Other people feel that $15,000 like a boulder on their chest. They can't sleep, they can't focus. Every month that debt exists is a month of suffering. If you're the second person, paying off that 5% loan might be the right choice, even though the math says you should invest instead. Because peace of mind has value, mental health has value, and those things don't show up on a spreadsheet. This is where behavioral economics comes in. Research shows that humans feel losses more intensely than equivalent gains. Losing $100 hurts more than gaining $100 feels good. It's called loss aversion, and it's hardwired into our brains. For many people, owing $10,000 feels worse than having $10,000 invested feels good. The debt creates more psychological pain than the investment creates psychological pleasure. If that's you, it's okay to pay off low-interest debt even when the math says invest. You're not being irrational. You're making a choice that accounts for your psychological reality. But here's the important part. Be honest with yourself about why you're making that choice. If you're paying off a 4% student loan because the debt keeps you up at night and causes real distress, that's a valid reason. If you're paying off a 4% student loan because you never learned about compound interest and you just assume all debt is bad, that's different. That's a decision based on ignorance, not psychology, and you should probably learn the math before you make it. There's also the question of your relationship with money and spending. Some people have spending problems. If they have $5,000 sitting in an investment account, they'll convince themselves they can sell some shares to buy something they don't need. They can't be trusted with accessible money. For those people, aggressively paying off debt is a form of forced savings. They're putting money somewhere they can't easily get it back and waste it. The debt payoff functions as a commitment device that prevents bad spending behavior. If that sounds like you, pay off the debt, even if the math says invest. You're using debt payoff as a behavioral tool to overcome your spending impulses. Then there's the motivational aspect. This is the debt snowball versus debt avalanche debate. The avalanche method says pay off the highest interest rate debt first because it saves you the most money mathematically. This is optimal. The snowball method says pay off the smallest balance first, regardless of interest rate, because quick wins keep you motivated. This is suboptimal mathematically, but it works better psychologically for some people. Research actually shows that people using the snowball method are more likely to become debt-free than people using the avalanche method. Why? Because motivation matters. If you're working on a $25,000 high-interest debt and making slow progress, you might get discouraged and quit. If you knock out a $1,500 debt in 2 months and feel a win, you might stay motivated enough to finish the whole journey. A suboptimal plan that you actually complete beats an optimal plan that you abandon halfway through. So if you need quick psychological wins to stay on track, start with a small debt, even if it's not the highest interest rate. Get it to zero, celebrate, then attack the big one. The math costs you maybe a few $100s, but it might save you from giving up entirely, which would cost you thousands. The last psychological factor is about mortgages specifically, because this is where people get really emotional. A mortgage at 3.5% should never be paid off early from a pure math perspective. You can invest that money and earn more than the mortgage costs you. But some people have a deep psychological need to own their home free and clear. They hate the idea of owing anyone anything. They want the security of knowing no one can take their house if they hit financial trouble. For those people, paying off the mortgage early is a lifestyle choice, not a financial optimization. And that's okay, as long as you understand you're choosing security and peace of mind over wealth maximization. If being debt-free lets you sleep at night, it's worth the opportunity cost. Just don't pretend you're making the mathematically optimal choice. You're making a psychological choice, and you should own that. Let's talk about something that changes the math in ways most people completely ignore: taxes. Because when you're comparing debt payoff to investing, you're not just comparing interest rates to investment returns. You're comparing after-tax returns, and that makes a bigger difference than you might think. Most investment returns are taxable. When you sell stocks for a profit, you pay capital gains tax. For most people, that's 15% on long-term gains. For high earners, it's 20%. Plus, you might pay state taxes on top of that. So if your investment returns 8% and you pay 15% capital gains tax when you sell, your real after-tax return is 6.8%. Meanwhile, paying off debt gives you a return equal to the interest rate, and that return is completely tax-free. The money you save on interest doesn't get taxed. This shifts the math. A 7% debt payoff is equivalent to earning about 8.2% in a taxable investment account, because you're not losing part of that gain to taxes. But it gets more complicated because different types of investments and different types of debt have different tax treatments. If you're investing in a Roth IRA, your investment gains are completely tax-free forever. So an 8% return in a Roth IRA is a true 8% return with no taxes ever. If you're investing in a traditional 401k or traditional IRA, you get a tax deduction now, but you'll pay income taxes when you withdraw in retirement. So the tax impact depends on your current tax bracket versus your future tax bracket. If you're investing in a regular taxable brokerage account, you'll pay taxes on dividends every year and capital gains taxes when you sell. On the debt side, most interest is not tax deductible. Credit card interest, not deductible. Auto loan interest, not deductible. Personal loan interest, not deductible. So paying off these debts gives you a tax-free return equal to the interest rate. But some debt interest is tax deductible. Mortgage interest is deductible if you itemize your deductions. The problem is, most people don't itemize anymore. The standard deduction is now so high that unless you have a massive mortgage or significant other deductions, you're better off taking the standard deduction. For 2025, the standard deduction is $14,600 for single filers and $29,200 for married couples. Unless your mortgage interest plus other deductible expenses exceeds that amount, you get zero tax benefit from the mortgage interest deduction. So for most people with average mortgages, the interest isn't actually deductible. It doesn't lower your taxes, which means paying it off gives you the full interest rate as a tax-free return. Student loan interest is deductible up to $2,500 per year, but it phases out at higher incomes. If you're single and make more than $90,000, you get no deduction. If you're married and make more than $185,000, no deduction. If you do qualify for the deduction, it lowers the effective interest rate on your loans. Here's an example. You have a $20,000 student loan at 5% interest. That's $1,000 in interest per year. If you're in the 24% tax bracket and you qualify for the student loan interest deduction, you can deduct that $1,000, which saves you $240 in taxes. Your effective interest cost is now $760 instead of $1,000. Your effective interest rate is 3.8% instead of 5%. At 3.8% effective rate, investing starts to make a lot more sense than paying off the loan. So here's what you need to do. Calculate the effective interest rate on your debt after accounting for any tax benefits. If your mortgage interest is actually deductible, reduce the stated rate by your tax bracket to get the effective rate. If it's not deductible, the effective rate equals the stated rate. If your student loan interest is deductible, reduce the stated rate. If it's not, use the full rate. Then compare that effective rate to the after-tax returns you expect from investing. For Roth IRA investing, you don't need to adjust for taxes. The return is the return. For traditional 401k or IRA, it gets complicated because you're deferring taxes. But generally, if you're in a high tax bracket now and expect to be in a lower one in retirement, the traditional account works in your favor. For taxable investing, reduce your expected return by 15 to 20% to account for capital gains taxes. Once you've adjusted both sides for taxes, the comparison becomes clearer. This is why I keep saying the threshold is around 6 to 7% instead of 8%. Because when you account for taxes, a 7% debt payoff is roughly equivalent to an 8 to 9% taxable investment return. It's not quite as simple as just comparing the numbers on the surface. You have to think through the tax implications. Here's something that changes the entire decision that most people don't even consider. How stable is your income? Because the right answer when you have a secure government job is very different from the right answer when you're a freelancer or gig worker. If you have a stable job with predictable income, you can afford to aggressively pay down debt. You know that paycheck is coming every 2 weeks. You can plan around it. You can commit to throwing $500 a month at your credit card because you know you'll have the income to support it. But if your income fluctuates, aggressively paying off debt can be dangerous. Here's why. When you pay off debt, that money is gone. You can't get it back. You've reduced your debt balance, which is great, but you've also reduced your cash reserves. If you're a freelancer and you throw $5,000 at your credit card, and then next month your income drops because a client delays payment, you're in trouble. You can't call the credit card company and ask for that $5,000 back. It's gone. You still have minimum payments due, you still have rent due, you still need to eat, but you've reduced your ability to handle an income disruption. This is the liquidity problem. Debt payoff is permanent. You can't reverse it when circumstances change. But investments are liquid. You can sell them if you need cash. For people with unstable income, keeping cash reserves and investing extra money is often smarter than aggressively paying off debt, even when the debt has a relatively high interest rate. Here's the strategy for unstable income. Build a much larger emergency fund, 6 to 12 months of expenses instead of 3 to 6. This is your buffer against income volatility. Make minimum payments on all your debt. Don't aggressively pay it down. Invest your extra money in accessible accounts, not retirement accounts where you'll pay penalties for early withdrawal, regular brokerage accounts where you can sell quickly if needed. Why? Because if your income drops, you can stop investing immediately. You can even sell some investments to cover expenses if necessary, but you can't stop debt payments. Those are fixed obligations that don't care if your income fluctuates. Let me show you a scenario. You're a freelance graphic designer. You make good money, but it's irregular. Some months you bring in $7,000. Other months it's $3,000. You average about $60,000 per year, but it's lumpy. You have $15,000 in credit card debt at 20%. You have $10,000 in savings. You're trying to decide what to do. Option A, throw the $10,000 at the credit card debt. You now owe $5,000 on the card instead of $15,000. You're saving $2,000 per year in interest. Great. But next month, you have a slow month. You only bring in $2,500. Your rent is $1,800. Your minimum credit card payment is $150. You need another $1,000 for food, gas, and other basics. You're short. You have no cash reserves because you use them to pay down the debt. You have to put expenses back on the credit card. Within a few months of income volatility, you're back where you started, maybe worse. Option B. Keep the $10,000 in a high-yield savings account earning 5%, make minimum payments on the credit card, invest your extra money when you have good months. You're paying $3,000 per year in credit card interest. You're earning $500 per year on your savings. Net cost $2,500 per year. That's $500 more expensive than option A. But when you have a slow month, you've got $10,000 in cash to cover expenses. You don't go into new debt. You stay afloat. Over the long run, you can strategically pay down the debt when you've built enough buffer, but you do it from a position of stability, not desperation. For people with unstable income, option B is smarter even though it costs more in interest, because it accounts for the reality of fluctuating cash flow. Here's the rule. If you have stable, predictable income, follow the mathematical framework. Pay off high-interest debt aggressively. If your income is variable or you work in an industry with layoff risk, prioritize liquidity. Keep larger cash reserves. Invest rather than aggressively paying debt. Protect your flexibility. Income stability changes the entire calculus. How old you are matters more than most people realize when you're making this decision, and it's because of how compound interest works over time. Compound interest is powerful, but it needs time to work its magic. The earlier you start investing, the more time your money has to grow. And the difference between starting at 25 versus 35 is absolutely massive. Let me show you the math that proves this. Person A starts investing $500 per month at age 25. They invest for 10 years from 25 to 35. Then they stop completely. They never add another dollar. Total invested, $60,000. They let that money sit and grow at 8% per year until age 65. At retirement, that account is worth $518,000. Person B waits until age 35 to start investing. They invest $500 per month from age 35 all the way to age 65. 30 years of contributions. Total invested, $180,000. At retirement, that account is worth $745,000. Person B invested 3 times as much money, $180,000 versus $60,000, but they only ended up with about $227,000 more. They had to invest an extra $120,000 to gain an extra $227,000 in final value. Now look at person C. They wait until age 45 to start. They invest the same $500 per month from 45 to 65. Total invested, $120,000. At retirement, $247,000. Person A invested $60,000 and ended with $518,000. Person C invested $120,000, double the amount, and ended with $247,000, less than half of person A's total. Same monthly contribution, different start date, $500,000 difference. This is why age matters when you're deciding between paying off debt and investing. If you're 24 years old and you have a student loan at 5% interest, paying it off aggressively might be the wrong move. Those early investing years are so valuable that missing them could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. You might be better off making minimum payments on that 5% loan and investing everything else, even though the math on paper says the loan is costing you money. The opportunity cost of missing early investment years is higher than the interest cost on low-rate debt. But if you're 50 years old, the math flips. You only have 15 or 20 years until retirement. Compound interest doesn't have as much time to work its magic. At 50, the guaranteed return from paying off a 6% loan starts looking more attractive than the uncertain return from investing. You're prioritizing certainty and debt reduction as you approach retirement. Here's the framework. If you're under 30 and you have debt below 6%, strongly consider investing instead of paying it off early. The time value of those investment years is enormous. If you're between 30 and 45, follow the standard math. Debt above 7%, pay it off. Below 5%, invest. Gray zone, use other factors to decide. If you're over 45, lean toward paying off debt unless it's very low interest. You're approaching retirement, and the guaranteed return of debt elimination becomes more valuable than the uncertain returns of market investing. Age changes the equation because time changes the power of compound interest. But there's a nuance here. This assumes you'll actually invest the money if you don't pay off the debt. If you're 26 years old and you convince yourself to keep the student loan so you can invest, but then you spend that money instead, you've made the worst possible choice. You have to be honest with yourself. If you're disciplined enough to invest, age matters. If you're not, pay off the debt because at least you're forced to make progress somewhere. All right, we've covered all the factors. Now let's put this into a step-by-step framework you can actually use to make this decision for your specific situation. I'm going to walk you through this like a decision tree. Answer each question honestly, and by the end, you'll know exactly what to do with your next dollar. Step 1. Do you have $1,000 to $2,000 in an emergency fund? If no, build this first before you do anything else. This is non-negotiable. Without this buffer, you'll end up creating new debt every time something unexpected happens, and you'll never make progress. If yes, move to step 2. Step 2. Does your employer offer a 401k match? If yes, contribute enough to get the full match. This is free money. Even if you have high interest debt, capture the match. It's the one exception to every other rule. If no, or if you're already getting the full match, move to step 3. Step 3. What's the interest rate on your highest interest debt? If it's 20% or higher, this is an emergency. Credit cards, payday loans, anything in this range needs to die immediately. Throw every extra dollar at this debt until it's gone. Don't invest anything beyond the employer match until this is handled. If it's between 10 and 20%, pay this off before investing more. The guaranteed return is too good to pass up. Attack this aggressively. If it's between 7 and 10%, you're in the gray zone. Consider these additional factors. Are you under 30 years old? If yes, and the debt is closer to 7%, you might invest instead to capture those early compound interest years. Are you over 40? If yes, lean toward paying off the debt. Is your income unstable? If yes, keep cash and invest instead of paying debt. Is your income very stable? If yes, pay off the debt. If it's between 4 and 7%, lean toward investing, but check the tax treatment. Is the interest tax deductible? If yes, calculate the effective rate. If the effective rate after deduction is below 5%, definitely invest instead. If it's above 6%, it's borderline. Use the gray zone factors. If it's below 4%, invest instead of paying it off early. The only exception is if the debt causes you severe psychological stress. In that case, pay it off for peace of mind, but understand you're making a psychological choice, not a mathematical one. Step 4. Once you've made your decision on the high interest debt, build your full emergency fund. How much you need depends on your situation. Stable income, 3 to 4 months of expenses. Unstable income, 6 to 12 months. This comes before aggressive investing beyond the employer match. Step 5. Now you're ready to invest aggressively. Max out your Roth IRA if your income qualifies. That's $7,000 per year for 2025. If you have access to an HSA, max that out. It's the most tax-advantaged account available. $4,300 for individuals, $8,550 for families. Increase your 401k contributions beyond the match. If you max all of those out, open a taxable brokerage account and invest there. Step 6. What about remaining low-interest debt? If you followed the framework, you've paid off everything above 7%, you've built your emergency fund, you're investing in tax-advantaged accounts. Now you have a choice with remaining low-interest debt. Let's say you have a 4.5% student loan or a 5% car loan. Mathematically, you should invest instead of paying these off early. The market historically returns more than 4.5%, but psychologically, you might want to be debt-free. If that's important to you, it's fine to pay these off. Just understand you're choosing peace of mind over optimal wealth building. Either choice is defensible at this stage. Let me walk you through a real example to show you how this works in practice. Meet Sarah. She's 29 years old. She makes $65,000 per year. She has 3 debts: $8,000 on a credit card at 22%, $28,000 in student loans at 5.5%, and $12,000 on a car loan at 6%. She has $3,000 in savings. She has about $800 a month extra after paying all her minimum payments and bills. Her employer matches 50% of 401k contributions up to 6% of her salary. Here's Sarah's optimal path based on the framework. Month 1 to 2. Keep $2,000 as her emergency fund. Use the remaining $1,000 plus $800 a month to attack the credit card. Month 3 to 11. Start contributing to her 401k to get the employer match.
That's $325 a month. She'll get $162 a month in matching. Throw the remaining $475 a month at the credit card. After about 11 months total, the credit card is gone. Month 12 to 26. Build her emergency fund to $12,000. That's 4 months of expenses. She saves the full $800 a month, plus the $325 she was putting in the 401k temporarily. It takes about 15 months. Month 27 onward. Resume the $325 a month 401k contribution to keep getting the match. Start putting $250 a month into a Roth IRA. That leaves $225 a month. For the student loans at 5.5%, she's young and the rate is borderline. She decides to make minimum payments only and invest the difference because she's 29 and compound interest matters. For the car loan at 6%, she puts the remaining $225 a month toward paying it off early since it's above her threshold. Why this path works? She killed the 22% credit card debt as fast as possible. She captured the employer match throughout. She built a proper emergency fund before investing heavily. She's making a strategic choice on the student loans because she's young and the rate is borderline to expected investment returns. This is how you apply the framework to a real situation.
You know the framework now, but knowing it doesn't help if you make these execution mistakes that derail everything. Mistake number 1, splitting the difference. You decide to put $200 toward debt, $200 toward investing, $200 towards savings because it feels balanced. This is the worst possible approach. You're not paying debt fast enough to save meaningful interest. You're not investing enough to get compound interest working. You're making minimal progress everywhere instead of real progress somewhere. Pick one priority based on the framework and attack it. Finish it. Then move to the next one. Mistake number 2, paying off debt while still using the credit cards. You're sending $500 a month to your credit card company while charging $600 a month in new purchases. You're going backwards. You're not making progress. You're just churning debt. If you're going to pay off credit card debt, you have to stop using the cards, period. Switch to debit or cash until the cards are at 0. Mistake number 3, investing before building any emergency fund. You have 0 in savings. You're putting $500 a month into a Roth IRA because you read about compound interest. Then your car breaks down. $1,200 repair. You have no cash. It goes on a credit card at 24%. You just took on high interest debt to fund a retirement account. That's backwards. That's building on sand. Always build the $1,000 to $2,000 emergency fund first. Mistake number 4, ignoring the employer match because you have debt. You decide you need to be debt-free before you invest, so you skip the 401k entirely. You're leaving 50 to 100% instant returns on the table. That's a mistake even if you have credit card debt. Always get the match. Mistake number 5, paying off low-interest debt instead of investing when you're young. You're 25. You have $20,000 in student loans at 4%. You aggressively pay it off over 3 years. You just gave up 3 of the most valuable compound interest years of your life. The opportunity cost of that decision could be $100,000 or more by retirement. If you're young and the debt is cheap, invest instead. Mistake number 6, investing when you're carrying 20% interest debt. You're 32. You have $12,000 on credit cards at 22%. You decide to invest in index funds because you heard that time in market matters. Time in market does matter, but not when you're simultaneously paying 22% to a credit card company. No investment reliably returns 22% after taxes. Kill the high interest debt first. Mistake number 7, analysis paralysis. You spend 6 months researching whether to pay off your 6% car loan or invest. You read articles, you run calculators, you ask Reddit, you do nothing. Meanwhile, 6 months passed where you could have been making progress in either direction. At a certain point, just pick a path and execute. Either choice is probably fine. Indecision is costly. Mistake number 8, ignoring your psychology. You follow the math religiously. Your spreadsheet says invest instead of paying off the 5% student loan, but every night you lie awake stressed about the debt.
The math might say one thing, but if it's destroying your mental health, the math is wrong for you. Sometimes the optimal financial choice is the optimal life choice. So here's the truth about whether you should invest or pay off debt first. There's no universal answer. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something or oversimplifying. But there is a right answer for you, and it's based on specific numbers. Your interest rates, your age, your income stability, your psychology. The framework is simple. Build a small emergency fund, get the employer match, pay off debt above 7 to 8%, build your full emergency fund, then invest aggressively. For debt in the gray zone between 5 and 7%, let your age and situation decide. Young with stable income, lean toward investing. Older with variable income, lean toward debt payoff. And if debt causes you severe stress, pay it off even if the math says otherwise. Your mental health matters more than optimal wealth building. The key is this: you're not choosing between debt payoff and investing forever. You're choosing which comes first. Eventually, you do both. Eventually, you're debt-free and building wealth through investments. The question is just about sequence, and now you have the framework to figure out the right sequence for you. Stop overthinking it. Run your numbers through the decision tree, make a choice, execute. Your future self doesn't care whether you made the perfectly optimal decision. They care that you made a decision and followed through. Because the real mistake isn't choosing wrong between debt and investing. It's choosing neither because you're paralyzed trying to optimize. Pick your path, start today. The compound interest clock is ticking.